Hey, welcome back. Today we're diving into something your body will thank you for. A clear, science-backed look at how processed meats affect your health, especially after age 60. Processed meats show up everywhere, from a quick sandwich to breakfast bacon or a few slices of cold cuts at lunch. They're convenient, flavorful, and often considered harmless in moderation. But for older adults, there's more going on beneath the surface. Did you know that regularly eating just 50 grams of processed meat a day, that's about 2 slices of ham, is linked with an increased risk of colorectal cancer, according to the World Health Organization? Before we get into it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, especially if you care about taking charge of your health with real, practical knowledge. Let me know in the comments. What's one small health habit you're proud of lately? All right, let's get into what we're really eating when we reach for that deli ham or sausage link. When we talk about processed meat, we're referring to any meat that's been preserved through smoking, curing, salting, or the addition of chemical preservatives. It includes things like bacon hot dogs, sausages, deli meats like ham, turkey, roast beef, bologna, jerky canned meats. What separates these from something like grilled chicken or a baked pork chop? It's not just preparation, it's the presence of additives that fundamentally alter how your body processes them. You might see terms like nitrates, nitrites, phosphates, preservatives, and flavor enhancers on the label. These aren't just meaningless jargon, they have very real effects on digestion, inflammation, and how your organs age. Even meats labeled natural or organic can still be processed if they use celery powder, a natural source of nitrates, or other curing agents. So don't let the branding fool you. Now, why does this matter more after 60? As we age, our metabolism slows. Our organs, especially the liver and kidneys, may not clear toxins and additives as efficiently. The gut lining thins, and the balance of bacteria in our microbiome becomes more sensitive to disruption. That means our bodies become more reactive to what we consume, even if we've been eating it for years. It's not uncommon to hear older adults say, "I used to eat this all the time, and now it upsets my stomach." Or they begin noticing subtle things like bloating, fatigue, or joint stiffness after certain meals. That's not random. It's part of how the body shifts with time. Here's an analogy. Imagine your body as a factory. In your 30s and 40s, it's running at full capacity, with workers quickly identifying and filtering out anything harmful. But in your 60s, some systems slow down, fewer workers, slower filtration. That means harmful compounds can linger longer, and the effects add up faster. Let's touch briefly on an often overlooked concern: accumulation. One slice of bacon won't cause disease, but eating small amounts of processed meat consistently over years and decades creates a kind of cumulative stress on your system. The body remembers, in the form of DNA changes, tissue inflammation, and oxidative stress. And here's the twist. Many people assume processed meat is only a young person's problem. Fast food, student diets, etc. But processed meat intake in older adults is surprisingly high, partly because it's convenient, pre-cooked, easy to chew, and doesn't spoil quickly. It's common in retirement communities, hospital menus, and home routines alike. That convenience comes at a hidden cost. So to wrap up this first section, here's the takeaway. Processed meats aren't just about what's added to them. They're about how those additions interact with an aging body that's naturally more vulnerable to inflammation, microbiome disruption, and slower detox processes. In the next section, We'll explore what those additives actually do inside your gut and why it matters more now than ever. So now that you know what processed meats are and how they quietly accumulate stress in the body, let's move deeper into one of the most sensitive systems they affect, your gut. You've probably heard the phrase gut health more and more in recent years. It's not a trend. It's science catching up with something both ancient healing traditions and modern research agree on. Your gut is at the core of your immune system, mental clarity, digestion, and inflammation control. And unfortunately, processed meats aren't doing it any favors, especially not after age 60. Let's start with one of the main culprits, nitrates and nitrites. These are added to most processed meats to preserve color and prevent bacterial growth. When you see that fresh pink color in deli turkey or ham, that's often nitrates at work, not necessarily freshness. Here's where it gets complicated. In the body, nitrates can convert into nitrosamines, particularly in the acidic environment of the stomach. Nitrosamines are classified as carcinogenic, meaning they're linked to an increased risk of cancer, particularly colorectal and gastric cancers. Now, your body isn't defenseless if you eat nitrates occasionally and your diet is full of antioxidants like vitamin C, polyphenols, and fiber. You may buffer a lot of that risk. But for older adults, two things change the equation. The stomach lining becomes thinner and less protective. The microbiome, the ecosystem of good bacteria in your gut, becomes more fragile. When these two factors combine, it creates a gut environment that's more reactive and more likely to absorb harmful compounds instead of filtering them out. You might be wondering, but I feel fine when I eat processed meat. And that's a valid point. Symptoms aren't always obvious. Gut damage can be silent for years, expressing itself later through things like chronic constipation or irregular digestion, food intolerances that weren't there before immune weakness, brain fog, joint pain. Yes, this is connected. More on that soon. Let's look at an analogy. Your gut is like a garden. When you're young, it's full of rich soil, strong roots, and biodiversity. But after 60, the soil naturally dries out a bit. It's easier for weeds, harmful bacteria, to take over, and harder for new seeds, good microbes, to thrive. Processed meats? They're like dumping salt and chemicals on that garden, disrupting the ecosystem further. Now here's a misunderstood myth. If it's high in protein, it must be good for me. Processed meats are often high in protein, yes, but they're also high in sodium, preservatives, and saturated fat. And the protein is usually of lower biological value compared to fresh meats, legumes, or fish. Worse still, they lack fiber, which is crucial for feeding the good bacteria in your gut. So when seniors rely too much on processed meat for protein, they may be starving their microbiome at the same time. There's even evidence that a disrupted gut microbiome is linked with faster cognitive decline. In one study, elderly adults with more diverse, plant-rich diets had better memory scores and lower markers of inflammation. And notably, they consumed less processed meat. Let's bring this to a real-world application. If you often reach for easy options like deli meats, hot dogs, or bacon, try this instead. Replace ham with mashed avocado and boiled egg on toast. Swap sausage patties for grilled tempeh or tofu in a breakfast wrap. Add hummus, roasted veggies, or leftover chicken to your sandwich instead of cold cuts. And if you do eat processed meat occasionally, pair it with vitamin C, rich veggies Like bell peppers or citrus, this may help reduce nitrosamine formation in your stomach. One final point worth mentioning, there's still ongoing debate around how much nitrate is too much and whether all nitrates are equally harmful. Some come from natural sources like spinach or beetroot, but those are paired with fiber, antioxidants, and anti-inflammatory compounds. Processed meat isn't. In other words, the context matters. And when it comes to aging guts, the context is less forgiving. So here's the key takeaway from this section. Processed meats are full of additives that disrupt the gut's delicate balance, and that disruption gets riskier with age. It's not about fear. It's about knowing how to protect your inner ecosystem. In the next section, we'll connect what's happening in your gut to a much bigger issue: chronic inflammation, and how processed meats quietly fuel it from the inside out. If you've been following along, you now understand how processed meats aren't just about convenience. They can quietly disrupt your gut and throw off your internal balance. But what happens next in the chain reaction? That leads us to one of the most important, yet misunderstood, concepts in aging and health: inflammation. You might associate inflammation with swelling or pain, like when you sprain an ankle or get a sore throat. That's called acute inflammation, and it's actually a good thing. It's your body's way of healing. But what we're talking about here is chronic, low-grade inflammation, the kind that simmers under the surface for years. It doesn't hurt, but it ages your cells, weakens your organs, and quietly fuels most of the major diseases associated with aging: heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, Alzheimer's, and even some cancers. And yes, the regular consumption of processed meats is a major player in that fire. So what exactly in processed meats causes inflammation? Let's break it down simply. Saturated fats. Many processed meats are high in saturated fats, which can activate the body's immune cells in a way that triggers inflammation. Think of it like setting off smoke detectors throughout your body, even when there's no real fire. Advanced glycation. End products. AGEs. These are compounds formed when meat is cooked at high temperatures, like grilling, frying, or smoking. Processed meats are often pre-cooked this way for flavor. AGEs accumulate in your tissues over time, and your body sees them as damaged goods, kicking up immune responses that keep inflammation alive. Excess sodium. High sodium levels not only raise blood pressure, but also promote fluid retention, vascular stress, and tissue irritation, especially in aging kidneys and blood vessels. Gut disruption. As we covered earlier, damage to the microbiome allows inflammatory signals to leak from the gut into the bloodstream, a phenomenon called leaky gut, and processed meat helps accelerate that leak. Now here's the twist. You might not feel inflamed. Chronic inflammation doesn't show up like a rash or fever. It hides in everyday annoyances. Feeling tired even after a full night's sleep, brain fog or forgetfulness, achy joints that come and go, recurring infections, or slow healing. Subtle weight gain, especially around the belly. These signs are easy to brush off as normal aging, but they may actually be signs your body is reacting to ongoing inflammatory triggers, including what's on your plate. Let's use a simple analogy. Imagine your immune system as a thermostat. In youth, it's finely tuned, but as you age, the thermostat becomes sensitive, overreacting to small changes. Processed meats, they crank up the heat even when the room doesn't need it. And your body keeps sweating, chronically, behind the scenes. Now, there's a myth worth busting here. If I just take turmeric or fish oil, I can balance it out. While anti-inflammatory supplements can help, they're not a cure-all, especially if the inflammatory fire is still being fed every day by processed meats. It's like trying to put out a burning log with a glass of water. You're better off removing the log first. This doesn't mean you need to follow a strict or extreme diet, but making conscious choices to reduce the sources of inflammation, not just treat the symptoms, is a far more powerful approach. Here's a real-world step you can try. Start with awareness. Don't try to change everything at once. For a week, write down each time you eat something that's smoked, cured, or from a package. Then ask yourself, can I replace one processed meat per day with a fresh protein? Could I try a meatless lunch once a week with beans, lentils, or eggs? Could I use herbs and spices instead of bacon to flavor dishes? Even small shifts matter. Remember, inflammation builds over time, but so does healing. Now, to keep things balanced, let's acknowledge there's still debate in the scientific world. Some experts argue that context matters more than the food alone, that inflammation comes from patterns, not isolated ingredients. That's fair, but when you look at the patterns common in healthy, long-living populations, from Okinawa to the Mediterranean, processed meat rarely plays a role. Instead, those diets are rich in whole foods, healthy fats, fiber, and plant-based proteins. So while the science of inflammation is still evolving, the trends are clear. Removing processed meats from your regular rotation is one of the most impactful, evidence-based steps you can take for long-term health after 60. Next, we'll dig into exactly how processed meats impact your heart and cancer risk, and why these effects matter more in older adults. By now, you've seen how processed meats quietly disrupt the gut, feed inflammation, and shift how your body handles aging. But there's a bigger picture that ties it all together, one that hits at the core of long-term health and longevity: your heart and your risk of cancer. These are two of the top health concerns for older adults, and the role of processed meat in both has been the subject of major studies over the last 2 decades. What researchers have found may surprise you, especially if you've thought of your diet as pretty balanced or mostly healthy. Let's walk through what's happening inside your body and why even occasional indulgence in processed meats can have outsized effects after age 60. We'll start with your heart. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death worldwide, and it becomes far more likely with age. After 60, your arteries naturally become less elastic, your blood vessels more sensitive to damage, and your heart muscle less efficient at handling stress. So it's no surprise that your diet becomes even more important in protecting this system. Here's how processed meats hurt heart health. Sodium overload. Many processed meats contain more than 400 to 500 milligrams of sodium per serving. That's over 20% of the recommended daily limit in just a few slices. Sodium raises blood pressure by increasing fluid retention and stressing your blood vessels. For older adults who are more salt-sensitive, this can quietly push blood pressure higher over time, increasing the risk of stroke and heart attack. Saturated fat and cholesterol sausages, bacon, and certain deli meats are high in saturated fat, which contributes to higher LDL cholesterol, the kind that clogs arteries. While not every older adult reacts the same way, the cumulative effects on arterial stiffness and plaque buildup are well documented. nitrite compounds, and endothelial damage. Remember the nitrates and nitrites we discussed earlier? When converted into nitrosamines, these can damage the endothelium, the delicate inner lining of your blood vessels. Damaged endothelium can't expand and contract properly, leading to poor circulation and setting the stage for atherosclerosis. You might be thinking, I've been eating ham and turkey my whole life. Isn't moderation okay? And the short answer is yes. If your overall diet is deeply nutrient-dense, your blood pressure is stable, and you're physically active, your body may tolerate small amounts. But studies show that even small regular amounts of processed meat can increase heart disease risk, and this risk compounds over time. In fact, a 2020 study published in JAMA Internal Medicine followed over 29,000 people and found that consuming just 2 servings of processed meat per week was associated with a 7% higher risk of heart disease and 3% higher risk of all-cause mortality. And here's the thing. Those percentages matter more as you age, not less. When your resilience is lower and your repair systems slow down, even small extra stresses carry weight. Now let's talk about cancer, particularly colorectal cancer, which has the most robust link to processed meats. In 2015, the World Health Organization classified processed meats as Group 1 carcinogens, the same category as tobacco and asbestos. This doesn't mean they're equally dangerous in scale, but it does mean the evidence is just as strong. The main concern is, again, those nitrosamines, formed when nitrites in meat interact with proteins during digestion. These compounds can directly damage DNA in colon cells, leading to mutations and tumor growth over time. And for older adults, several risk factors come into play. Slower digestion, meaning harmful compounds linger longer in the gut, weakened immune surveillance, meaning damaged cells are less likely to be caught and destroyed, early age-related changes in the microbiome, which may allow pro-cancer compounds to flourish. There's also growing evidence that bile acid production changes after age 60, especially in response to high-fat, high-protein foods. These bile acids can irritate the colon lining and encourage cancer-promoting inflammation. Let's pause here for a quick mythbuster. Only red meat is bad. Poultry cold cuts and turkey bacon are safer. Not necessarily. Many turkey and chicken deli slices still contain nitrites, preservatives, and sodium at levels similar to red meats. In other words, it's not just the color of the meat, it's how it's been processed. So while choosing poultry over pork might be a small improvement, it doesn't remove the long-term risks unless you're choosing truly unprocessed whole foods. In practical terms, here are a few gentle shifts to protect your heart and reduce cancer risk. Read labels. If it lists sodium nitrate, cured, smoked, or preserved, consider skipping it. Rotate in fresh proteins like beans, lentils, tofu, fish, or eggs a few times a week. Build fiber into every meal. This helps bind and remove harmful compounds from the gut. Cook more meals at home, where you control both ingredients and preparation methods. And if you enjoy meat, try this. Grill or roast fresh cuts of meat in batches, then store them for sandwiches or salads. That way, you still get the convenience of ready-to-eat protein without the preservatives. So here's the key takeaway. Processed meats affect your heart and cancer risk in slow, cumulative ways. And after 60, your body becomes more vulnerable to those impacts. But knowledge is power. The more you understand the why, the easier it becomes to choose the how. In the final section, we'll shift focus from avoidance to enjoyment. What can you eat instead that's flavorful, easy, and supportive of your long-term health? So far, we've talked a lot about what to watch out for. The sodium, the nitrates, the hidden damage that processed meats can bring to the aging gut, heart, and immune system. But here's something important. Healthy eating isn't about deprivation. It's not about guilt. It's about empowerment, about finding satisfying, flavorful options that love you back. That's especially true after age 60, when food isn't just about nutrition, it's about comfort, routine, and sometimes even identity. Maybe you've been eating bacon on Sundays for decades, or ham sandwiches were your go-to lunch at work. Change doesn't have to mean giving those memories up. It just means shifting toward habits that better match where your body is now. So let's talk about what to eat instead, and how to make those swaps delicious, simple, and sustainable. First, let's tackle the most common objection. But I need the protein. Absolutely. And you're right to prioritize it. After 60, we start to lose muscle mass naturally, a process called sarcopenia. Protein becomes even more critical to maintaining strength, mobility, and metabolism. The issue isn't protein itself, it's where it comes from and what it brings along for the ride. Processed meats bring protein plus salt, preservatives, and inflammatory compounds. But whole, unprocessed foods bring protein plus vitamins, minerals, and anti-inflammatory benefits. And that makes all the difference. Here are some powerful, easy-to-use, protein-rich alternatives for older adults. 1. Eggs, one of nature's most complete proteins. They're versatile, easy to digest, and don't require additives. Scramble them with veggies, slice them over toast, or hard-boil for snacks. 2. Canned fish in water. Tuna, sardines, and salmon are high in omega-3s, which help reduce inflammation and protect the heart. Just watch the sodium on some brands. 3. Rotisserie chicken or baked chicken breast. Great for sandwiches, salads, and wraps. If pre-seasoned, check labels for nitrites or excess sodium. 4. Beans and lentils, not just for vegetarians. They're protein-rich and full of fiber, which supports your gut health. Try lentil soup, bean salads, or hummus as spreads. 5. Tofu or tempeh, mild in flavor and excellent at absorbing spices. These soy-based proteins are gentle on digestion and rich in calcium and magnesium, especially helpful for older bones. 6. Greek yogurt, plain, high in protein and probiotics. Add berries, flax seeds, or a sprinkle of cinnamon for flavor without added sugar. 7. Nuts and seeds. Almonds, walnuts, chia seeds, or pumpkin seeds add texture, protein, and healthy fats. Use them in oatmeal, salads, or smoothies. Let's take a practical example. Instead of a ham sandwich on white bread with cheese, try grilled chicken breast on whole grain, bread with hummus, and leafy greens. You still get the protein and flavor, but you also get fiber, healthy fats, and zero preservatives. Want something with a salty crunch? Roast some chickpeas with olive oil and paprika. Want something savory and smoky? Try seasoning your eggs or lentils with smoked paprika or liquid smoke. You can capture the flavor of bacon without the downside. And here's a common myth to bust. Plant-based means boring. Not true. In fact, many of the world's longest-living communities, from Okinawa to Sardinia, eat mostly plant-based meals rich in beans, greens, herbs, and whole grains. They use spices, citrus, garlic, and olive oil to bring depth and flavor. Meat, when used, is often fresh, local, and eaten in small amounts, not as the center of every meal. In fact, making processed meats less central to your diet often makes room for more creativity, variety, and color. Another practical tip: batch cook and prep. If convenience is the reason you reach for deli meats, plan ahead with 1 or 2 easy prep sessions per week. Bake or grill a tray of chicken thighs or salmon fillets, boil a dozen eggs, cook a pot of lentils or beans, wash and chop veggies, make a batch of quinoa or brown rice, store in glass containers, and mix and match during the week. Suddenly, grab-and-go meals are just as easy and way more nourishing. Let's also talk briefly about hydration and digestion, because they go hand in hand with diet after 60. Processed meats are low in water and fiber, which means they can worsen constipation or slow digestion, a common issue in older adults. In contrast, many of the alternatives we've discussed, like beans, yogurt, veggies, are naturally hydrating, high in fiber, and easier on your system. So by swapping your protein sources, you're not just changing what's on your plate, you're supporting multiple systems at once: digestion, inflammation, heart, gut, and brain. Here's your gentle challenge: try just one processed meat-free day each week. Make it fun, pick a new recipe, explore new flavors, or invite someone to cook with you. These small shifts are where long-term health really builds. And remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about being intentional. You've made it this far because you care about your body, your future, and your independence. Let your food reflect that same care, not just by avoiding what harms, but by choosing what heals. Next up, we'll do a quick wrap-up to tie everything together and help you move forward with confidence. Final wrap-up: small shifts, big rewards. If you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you. We've covered a lot, not just about processed meats, but about your gut, your heart, your immune system, and how all of it becomes more interconnected and more sensitive as we age. Let's take a breath and calmly recap what we've learned. You now know that processed meats aren't just salty or convenient. They're filled with preservatives, nitrites, saturated fat, and additives that quietly affect your digestion, promote inflammation, and increase your risk of heart disease and cancer, particularly after the age of 60, when your body is working a bit harder to maintain balance. But none of this is about fear. It's about awareness and choice. With a few small shifts in your routine, replacing cold cuts with fresh, cooked proteins, exploring plant-based meals a couple times a week, choosing whole, fiber-rich foods to support your gut, flavoring meals with spices instead of bacon or sausage, drinking more water, especially with meals high in protein, you're giving your body the tools to thrive, not just survive. This isn't about giving up pleasure. In fact, as your palate shifts and your body begins to feel the difference, you might find more satisfaction in the food you eat, because it energizes you, supports your clarity, and allows you to stay independent and strong. Aging doesn't mean decline. It means adaptation, and the way you nourish your body is one of the most powerful ways to do that. Day by day, meal by meal. Thanks for spending this time with me. Stay healthy, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.